Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hi, listeners. This is Lindsay Smith-Rogers, producer of Public Health on Call. We are so thrilled with the feedback we're getting lately, particularly with our recent special series on racial bias and pulse oximeters. We're really looking forward to bringing you more special content like this in addition to our regular episodes. And just a programming note. This fall, we're refreshing our release schedule. Beginning September 4th, we'll have 2 regular podcasts a week on Mondays and Wednesdays, plus occasional bonus episodes for special content and breaking news. We're excited for this new approach, and we hope you like it. As always, we welcome your feedback and ideas for topics to cover. You can email us at publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. And now, on to today's show. This is Lindsay Smith-Rogers. A new variation of a dangerous fungal disease, Candida auris, has emerged in patients in yet another far-flung location, Singapore. Today, Stephanie Desmon talks to Arturo Casadevall, a Johns Hopkins infectious disease expert, about what this means for public health, for efforts to combat drug resistance, and how climate change is likely to continue bringing new fungal diseases to humans. Let's listen.
Arturo Casadevall, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for joining you, Stephanie.
So today I want to talk to you about a new subset of a fungal disease that has been found. But before we move on to that, first thing I want to do is full disclosure. You and I have written a book together about fungal disease and climate change, and it's called If Fungi Win. You and I have talked about these issues a long time, and I want to share some of the insights with our audience. I want to talk to you about sort of this new discovery. Can you tell us what happened?
So what happened is that last year, physicians and investigators in Singapore recovered a new clade of Candida auris. A clade is like a variant. It's within a species. So imagine a species that is known as Candida auris, but it's got subdivisions that are independent. And it is significant because Candida auris has become a major medical problem and in fact is being declared a critical pathogen by the WHO, the World Health Organization.
And so finding one that's different is very significant because?
So we need to go back and talk a little bit about the history of Candida auris. So Candida auris is not known to humanity up to around 2009 when it begins turning up in hospitals. And the situation gets worse in the next few years. And what happens is that in 2010, 2011, and 2012, it turns up independently in 3 continents, in Venezuela, South Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. It came out of nowhere. Since then, there have been 2 other emergencies, one in Iran and one in Russia. This will make the 6th. But the importance is that these are not related. It's not like somebody's taking a plane from South Africa and carrying it over to India or to Venezuela. These things are coming out from wherever they've been to threaten people.
Why are they coming out now?
That is the million-dollar question. I think the right thing to say is that we don't know. And once we say we don't know, then we can speculate. And one of the speculation, and for disclosure, I proposed it a few years ago with some colleagues, is that this is the result of global warming. It goes like this. This stuff is not new. It's been out there. And it's been living out there for a very long time, millions of years probably. And what happens is that as the world gets warmer, the fungi have to adapt or perish. And as they adapt, they begin to be able to grow at higher temperatures. And it turns out most fungi can't cause disease in humans. because they can grow at our temperature, which is 98 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees centigrade. So the thought is that the reason that these things are separate, independent events, is because the fungus has been adapting in the environment. And then after a while, by luck, by chance, by that, it gets into a situation it can infect humans. And then we have a new emergence.
How much of a risk is Candida auris to humans?
Well, to immunocompetent humans, it is not thought to be a big risk right now, but it is a big risk for anyone who is debilitated or is immunosuppressed, because it tends to be it's a formidable foe in the sense that once it gets into a hospital, it's very hard to get off. It tends to attach very strongly to surfaces, to beds, to bed railings. It's also resistant against 2 of our 3 major antifungal drugs. So it is a problem, serious problem, and the problem appears to be getting worse. And this emergence is telling you that, whoa, if this is continuing to emerge, we got to watch it, because it's happening in very different parts of the world. And just because Candida auris turns up in your hospital, you can't just necessarily conclude that it was carried there. It may have emerged in the region where you're at.
So my understanding is that in Singapore, they built a new machine that can test for different clades. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that, if you think that's going to lead to more discoveries.
Well, I think what they did is genetic analysis of it. And what you do is you basically sequence the DNA and you compare it to the existing databases. All these things are public. But I think the take-home message from the experience in Singapore is that if Candida auris shows up in a region or in a hospital that didn't have it before, it is probably worthwhile to study the isolate, to see if it is related to the other isolates in the country, or if we're having a local emergence.
Now, in Singapore, my understanding is that they are really looking for fungal disease, that they're swabbing patients when they come into the hospital who may be at risk. That doesn't happen everywhere, does it?
No, it happens in some places. It happens in situations in which cancer hospitals, places in which you're worried about, people becoming immunosuppressed or what effect the microbiome may have on drug therapy. But it is not part of anybody's physical exam. Nobody goes into a physical exam and comes out with knowledge about what they're carrying, although it may be in the future.
Well, I was going to ask that. I mean, is there value to that?
I think that if you can associate your flora with either a good condition or a bad condition, and it has what we call prognostic value, the answer is yes. Right now, that information is not there, and that's why it's not done. It would be expensive to do such screenings. Imagine adding microbial screening to everything that we do today. But if you can show that it makes a difference, then you can justify it.
So what can we do now that we see another clade? How do we move forward? What should we be doing to ensure that more people don't get sick?
So there are multiple answers to your question. I think clearly if it happens, you got to redouble infection control, because we know that this spreads from people to people. It's carried on by individuals, caretakers. So you need to make sure that you double down on infection control and it doesn't spread. You try to localize the problem as much as possible and eradicate it locally. I do think that we won't be able to get Candida auris out of the medicine anymore. It's sufficiently spread and it's in so many hospitals that is a problem that we're going forward. We need more drugs. We need better drugs. And we need more surveillance. Surveillance is the part that doesn't get funded and doesn't get done because we're just not that good at continuously checking for things. But we learn anything with COVID and we learn anything with Candida auris is that we need to know more about what's in the environment, because the threats from the environment are largely undefined. And we tend to get surprised over and over again. Candida auris surprises, COVID surprises. Now we're dealing with monkeypox in Africa. So it's, again, an investment on surveillance, an investment on drugs, an investment on infection control locally.
How can we do that better than we're doing it now?
Well, I think that having a podcast like this helps, because the people who listen to it, some of them will be informed. And I think information, in particular information for the medical community and for the public, is essential. A lot of physicians are not even familiar with this organism. And when it appears in their hospital, it kind of takes everyone by surprise.
You've called, as you said earlier, Candida auris you've said it's spreading because of climate change. You have proposed that. Does that mean there are more things like Candida auris out there?
Absolutely. And that's the big concern. And the idea is that the fungal world is enormous. The number of species is in the millions. Many of them are the major pathogens of plants, insects, other invertebrates, and even cold-blooded vertebrates. And that means that the fungal kingdom has a lot of pathogenic potential. And yet we don't worry about it too much because our temperature protects us. However, if they continue to adapt and we basically have something that can cause disease in a plant, cause disease in an insect that now can grow at 37, 38, 39 degrees, well, it's a potential threat. And that is what we worry about. We worry a lot about the unknown.
The United States, have we seen Candida auris here? And is it spreading?
It is spreading. And I believe a year or two ago, the CDC published a major study showing that not only was it rapidly spreading to the United States, but most concerning, that it was developing resistance to our last antifungal, which is the echinocandins. So you have two threats in my statement: increased dissemination of an organism with significant capacity to cause morbidity and mortality. And now the organism is also becoming more resistant, because if we only have one good drug against it, that's what we're using.
What happens if the drugs don't work anymore?
I think things will become much more difficult than they are. But hopefully there are more drugs in development, and hopefully new ones will be available that can use for therapy. This is why infection control is so important. You don't want to rely on therapy. You want to prevent the problem. Because when you get to therapy, then you always get into the danger of selecting for resistance.
Is there anything that you think the medical world isn't thinking of, as they try to move to find ways to combat these new emerging diseases?
I think that the medical world has its hands full. And therefore, when you mention to them potential threats, it's not that they roll their eyes, it's they say, but I'm already dealing with so much. I think but then that has to be paired with the fact that when we get surprised by nature, it's always devastating. The HIV pandemic was a surprise. The coronavirus pandemic is a surprise. The rise of Candida auris is a surprise. And I think we need to be more proactive to try to at least prepare better, even though I know we are maxed out and even though resources are very limited. What happens is that when we get hit, the problems are much greater than they would have caused had we expended on preparedness.
Now, when you say these fungi are found in the environment, what do you mean by that?
They're everywhere. They're in your, I wouldn't say Candida auris has been found only in some places in the Indian subcontinent and in the Andaman Islands. But the other fungi that I'm talking about are the ones that we worry could become potential pathogens, are everywhere. We have a study going on in our laboratory looking at fungi tolerance to heat in Baltimore. And we can show, and this is the work done by Daniel Smith in our laboratory, that even within the city of Baltimore, the fungi are adapted. So that the fungi from the cooler neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where there is a lot of trees, have lower heat tolerance than from the cooler regions. Like, for example, Fayette Street is a pretty hot area.
Wow.
So it's telling you that even within one city, we are seeing this phenomenon happen. Now multiply that by the whole planet, And the probability that something happens anywhere rises dramatically.
Arturo Casadevall, thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmon, and Grace Fernandez-Ciceri. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Holly Cardinale, Spencer Greer, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production management by Catherine Ricardo. Social media run by Grace Fernandez-Ciceri. Analytics by Eliza Rosen. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send us an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.